Hey guys, welcome to Warhammer Stuff. So today we have Drukari versus Deathguard's Mortarian Anvil, or Mortarian's Anvil. So let's go ahead and check out the armies.
Alright, so for today I am bringing Deathgaurd, Mortorian's Anvil, which is good for counter charges. So I have just under 2,000 points, and so for starters, I chose a Lord of Contagion, my Warlord. Pretty good guy. I gave him the Orb of Desiccation and the Man Reaper, so he has flexibility, because I could not for the life of me remember what my... He always tells me what he's going to play, but I never remember what it is. So he has high damage, or he has double hits. Apart from that, he has Explosive Outbreak for his, the Deathguard champion or character disease buff, which basically he has exploding sixes. He also has a Warp Insect Hive, which he rerolls hits, and he can reroll wounds. And his Warlord trait, what it does is he buffs other core units within 6 inches, that if any core unit has a plague weapon and they swing, they can reroll the wound roll. So he's high damage and stuff, but he's also support. Alright, then we have the Deathguard Sorcerer and Terminator armor, because I could not find any other sorcerers. But basically he is a buffer, essentially. He protects my guys, and he debuffs enemies. So, not really damage-wise, he's just designed for applying buffs or debuffs. And he has a Force Axe, because it has pretty decent damage, and he has I don't know why it says Meltagun there, but he has a Combi Melta. Yeah. Then we have a Plague Surgeon, essentially to help keep my high investment of Death Shroud in one piece. So he can basically just heal guys and stuff of wounds, and gives a feel no pain. So that's what he's doing. Also, these models look great. Then I have 2 giant units of Poxwalkers. Then I have 3 units of Marines. Now, the bigger ones, they have a Plague Champion, which has a Power Fist, and everyone else has a Bolt Gun. However, there is one Plague Marine in each of these 2 big squads that have a Great Cleaver, which is high damage, and then they have one that has a Flail, which is a lot of attacks, to be able to adapt to whatever threat is in front of me. And then I have a 3rd squad here for just not doing much. The champion does have a Power Fist as well, and according to the rules, so I have to have at least 1 squad of each of these to be able to have a non-Space Marine squad. So basically, I have 3 of these, so I can have 3 non-Astartes. So they got me 2 Poxwalker units and 1 unit of Cultists. And the champion just has Autogun. These are just cheap. It's 50 points. There's a throwaway unit just for tactical purposes. Then I have 2 Chaos Rhinos, which Chaos Rhinos have access to a lot of interesting weapons. They could each have Meltas or Flamers with their Bolter. So I just went with just straight up Combi Bolter, just regular stuff. I didn't want to go big with it. And they have a Havoc Launcher, which is actually surprisingly pretty good. They're surprised at the kind of weapons that you can put on a Chaos Rhino. Then we have, hopefully, the big hitters of the game. Death Shrouds. Very powerful. And the Death Shroud Champion, even. So Death Shroud Champion has a Man Reaper weapon, which pretty strong. Yeah, and I believe I gave him Unstable Sickness. Every time an enemy model is destroyed by his attack, roll d6 on a 4-up, the model's unit suffers a mortal wound up to 3. So, that's pretty good for a single character. They're pretty strong. There's 4 in total, so a bit difficult to get on the tabletop without spending a ton of money. And then we have, for fast attack, 2 Foated Bloat Drones, and they each have the, what was I going to call it? The Flesh Mower, so high melee damage, rapid movement, surprisingly rapid movement. And then, of course, a traditional Chaos Land Raider, because my super slow Death Shroud are going to need something to carry them into battle, and my Lord as well. So basic Twin Bolter, Twin Last Cannon, they got a Havoc Launcher, and a Meltagun. Yeah. And that is 2,000 points of Deathguard Mortorian's Anvil.
Alright, you guys, so I have 2,000 points of Drukari. Now, this is a real space raider, or a real space raid. So it has a mixed detachment thingy or whatever. But anyway, so this is a battalion, and this is 2,000 points. So for my Warlord, I have my Archon, who is Cabal of the Poison Tongue. It's the only one I really haven't done yet, so I figured I would give it a go. And Cabal of the Poison Tongue basically increases all my poison attacks by 1. So instead of poison 4, it's poison 3. And also, if a model in a unit dies from a poisoned weapon, they have -1 to their combat attrition rolls. So this Archon, he has a Warlord trait. I paid the points for Splinter Genius, and he has a Relic. So his Warlord trait is Hatred Eternal, so he can reroll hit and wound rolls. He's Splinter Genius, so once per battle, he can fight again at the end of the engagement phase, or the fight phase, sorry. And then he has the Djinn Blade, which is a relic, which is his relic. And so, yep, and so that's my Archon. Then I have a Succubus, who also has both a relic and a Warlord trait. She has an Archite Glaive and the Triptych Whip, which is like, I don't know, it's a really good relic for them. It's a poison weapon +2, and then she has +3 to her attacks with the relic, and then her Warlord trait gives her an additional 2 attacks. And yeah, that was it. She is also part of the Cult of Strife, which basically gives them +1 to charge, and something else if I recall. Let me see here. It does. Oh yeah, they have fight first, or always fight first. So all of the witch units have always fight first. And then I have my Homunculus, and these guys are part of the Dark Creed. So essentially, if his units are within, I think it's 6 inches or engagement range, 6 inches of any of my Homunculus units, they have a -1 to their leadership and combat attrition tests. And so if any of those units are swinging on someone who has less leadership than them, they actually have +1 to hit. So my Homunculus, I gave him a Warlord trait, which is Master Regenerist, which basically he can heal 3 wounds flat instead of D3 to any of his Homunculi guys. But other than that, he's just a base guy. He's really just kind of like a toughness buff. Sorry, my words are not working so well. Now, so those are my HQs. Moving into my troops section, I have 2 squads of identical Kabbalite warriors, and they all have splinter rifles, except for one guy in each squad that has a Shredder, which is basically a Strength 6 flamer, AP -1, single damage. And then I have a simple squad of 5 racks, nothing fancy there, they're literally just racks. And then I have a squad of witches, a full squad of 10. They just have Hekatari blades, which gives them an additional attack. And they do have the drugs of Adrenalite, the combat drug. So on the charge, they have an additional +1 attack. So on the charge, they'll have like 6 attacks on the Hecatrix and like 5 attacks on the regular people. So just a lot of attacks, not a lot of damage, but a lot of attacks. And that is it for my troops choices. Moving into my elites, I have 2 squads of identical and simple incubi, 2 squads of 5. And then over to the right, I have a squad of mandrakes, just because they're sneaky. And they can basically deploy anywhere during deployment, and then once per game, they can disappear and reappear somewhere. And then I have a slightly chunkier squad of grotesques. They just all have monster cleavers, and it's a squad of 4. And so those are my elites. Moving into my fast attacks, I have a squad of scourges, and these guys also have shredders. So there's 4 shredders in here, which are strength 6, AP1, single damage flamers. I have a squad of 3 reavers, and they have the combat drug, which gives them +2 inches to move. So these guys are 20-inch moves, just super speedy. And then I have a single squad of 5 Hellions. They don't have anything fascinating. Their combat drug, though, I do believe is also Adrenalite. It is, which gives them the +1 attack on the charge. And then that's my fast attacks. Heavy supports are pretty simple. I have a single squad of 2 Talos, both with microscalpels and dual heat lances, which are essentially 18-inch meltaguns. And then I have 2 Ravagers with triple Dark Lances. They don't have any upgrades as far as like, I don't know, trophy racks or whatever. And then I have 3 raiders. Now these ones have upgrades, but they only have a single disintegrator cannon. So I took off the dark lance in favor of the disintegrator cannons, pretty much for the points, because I needed like 3 points somewhere, and I was like, well, this is the way to go. So 2 of these have splinter racks, which basically means anyone who shoots from the inside with rapid fire weapons always counts within rapid fire range. And then the last one actually has grizzly trophies, which if you're within 3 inches, subtract 2 from the leadership of models in that unit. So I guess I'm going for like that leadership, whatever angle. And that is 2,000 points, or 1,981 points of Drukari.
Alright, so for this game, we're playing Conversion. It's Control 1, Control 2, Control More. The secondary objective is at the end of each of our turns. We get 2 points if we control a no man's land, 4 points if we control our opponent's home objective, and we lose 1 point if we don't control our home objective. As well as we can only gain CP if our warlord is on the battlefield or in a transport. And that is the mission. Alright, so for secondaries, we have for Deathgaurd, spread the sickness, because there's a lot of objectives, so there's a lot of potential for this to happen relatively easily. Then we have grind them down. My units are tougher and he has a lot more units, so I'm like, it's possible. Then engage on all fronts, because I think I can do it. I chose this over the Deathgaurd one because the Deathgaurd one is entirely based off the very end of the battle and not as the game goes on, so I thought this was more likely. And those are my secondaries.
Yes, so for me, I have Take Them Alive, which is a classic Dark Eldar one, where basically I get points for killing things in melee, 3 points for characters or monsters, and 1 point for anything else killed by a melee attack. As far as like whole units, to a max of 5 per turn. And then Fear and Terror, I get 1 victory point each time an enemy unit fails a morale test, falls back, or fails an action. And then anytime a enemy unit is destroyed by melee attack, I roll 2d6, and if I beat their leadership, I get a victory point as well, which could be kind of cool. And then I have Engage on all fronts, because I'm a highly mobile army, and it just kind of makes sense, as well as the other Drukari secondaries are really difficult to get. Honestly, the ones I took are probably going to be difficult to get, except maybe Fear and Terror. So we'll see how we go.
Alright, so for deployment, for me, the Deathgaurd, I placed my cultists first because I wanted to place them around, spread them out. I know he has a bunch of deep strikes and stuff like that, essentially, so I wanted to use them to help screen, but also hold the objective. After that, the next thing was placing my Chaos Land Raider because I wanted him to, well, since it's the bulk of my military might sort of in there, I wanted to have my force, basically I wanted him to try to counter me, so basically he would put units to counter them closer, and so that was the idea going forward. So I placed that first, he'd have opportunity to like surround me, so saving me some work. And apart from that, I just placed guys to go into 2 fronts, red going north, green going east, pretty much. Chaos Sorcerer near all of them, protected by line of sight and stuff, and a unit of Plague Marines next to him to guard him as well. And that pretty much was it, just trying to get in a position where I can hit everything. And yeah, that's essentially all I was thinking.
Yeah, so I had very few things that I was like, this must be a direct counter. So really, it was just how can I hide and then pop out of nowhere and shoot a bunch of stuff, hopefully to death. And that's essentially what I did with like 3 exceptions maybe. So everything, because everything I have is in transports or flying with 2 exceptions, 3 exceptions. So I just kind of hid behind stuff. I had maybe heavier duty stuff farther back. Just that way they can kind of readjust accordingly. He doesn't have a lot of anti-vehicle stuff, I would say, except maybe on that Land Raider. And he might have some some kind of missile launcher somewhere on his rhinos or whatever. But for the most part, they should be able to run around and do whatever. So I just kind of was like, I'll just have my mobile units farther back, so that way they can kind of spend some time getting into good positions and not have to worry about potentially being charged, even though Deathgaurd is probably one of the slowest armies out there. And yeah, so that was my plan, just kind of sit farther back and use my extreme mobility to hopefully my advantage and not my death.
Alright, so for who goes first, well, I'm pretty in a defensive position, so I would say I would want you to go first to give me some targets, because I'm not going to get to the locations in the first turn, unlikely. Actually, I'm not going to at all, in general. So, essentially, I'd prefer to have more targets to move and shoot and stuff like that, and be able to attack. Because if I go first, I'm not really going to go far. Sure, I have a lot of vehicles to help counter my absolutely slow movement, but I think it's better for me if I go second. That's essentially just because of my army and how they move. What about you?
Well, I would say I don't know if it matters so much for me. If I go first, I'll hop on most of the objectives pretty quick. I don't know what will survive, but I will be able to get onto these objectives. And I'll probably be able to get some shooting in, just because of how mobile my army is. If I go second, same thing. I'll still be able to hop onto all those objectives, because I think the fastest thing in your army are your vehicles, maybe the bloat drones. Mm-hmm. Everything else is what, like 5-inch movement or something? 4-inch for the poxwalkers. Anyway, so I don't know if it actually matters so much. I can easily get targets now. If I go first, I could easily get targets if I go second. So yeah, I don't think it actually matters for me in this case.
All right, well then, let's see what happens.
See what happens. Yeah, I got a 3.
I got a 5, so I'm cursed to go first. Right. All right.
That's right.
Well, Deathgaurd turn 1. All right, so for my overall thing, I just straight up pushed out. So I decided might as well make a break for it, try to get as far as I can in, because a lot of my army is melee and stuff. So I pushed out. I was able to take the middle. Cultists spread out. My vehicles were able to move around and do stuff. Floated bloat drones took forward positions. I'm trying to avoid as many future line of sights and stuff, but I can only do so much. The Chaos Land Raider moved up. I mean, he's in cover now, so he's fine. Basically, everyone ran except for the Deathgaurd Sorcerer. And yeah, and that's pretty much it. Alright, so for the Psychic phase, my Deathgaurd Sorcerer is going to buff the Poxwalkers, the red Poxwalkers in front. So essentially what it is Miasma Pestilence, I believe the name is. And I need a 6. And basically what it does is they will have -1, anytime my opponent targets them, they have -1 to be hit in general. So melee, shooting. So I roll a 3. I debated for a while and decided, you know what, it's probably worth it to try it. So I spend a command point to re-roll. It goes off just barely. Then I do a debuff on his mandrakes. The thing doesn't require line of sight according to it, and so basically it goes off on a 6, and he has -1 strength for the mandrakes unit. So we'll see if that does anything. And that was the Psychic phase. Alright, that's the end of my turn. So for points, I do get 2 points for conversion because I control the center objective in No Man's Land. Spread the Sickness, I forgot to show it and stuff, but basically my cultists activated on the home objective, and I get 3 points for it. We did it off camera, but basically I lost one guy because activating it does D3 wounds. Lost one guy. Then they had to take a morale check because their leadership is trash, but they passed it just barely. So I got 3 points for Spread the Sickness for my home objective. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It's piddling, so we'll see what happens here.
All right, you guys. So for movement, everything moved. So I started off with my witches, and they ran, and they got like a 5, so they were able to run 12. And then my succubus was not quite as fast. She rolled a 3, so she only was able to move 10. And then I moved my red raider and the reavers next to them, just kind of moving them up. Neither of those ran though. And then my ravager one of my ravagers jumped into that gap where they were sitting. My racks did nothing. And then that's where I started to have trouble deciding what to move next. So my grotesques, homunculus, and taloses moved into the middle, just to start to cement a position there. And then my green raider jumped not onto the objective, but close enough. And then the scourges and hellions followed close behind. And then the other ravager jumped into the gap that they left behind the building. And then I ran my raider with my warlord in it, just that way he would be in a less visible position. And then last but not least, my mandrakes just kind of moved. Really need to get farther away from the poxwalkers, but I don't know if they'll be able to avoid a charge either way, and stay on the objective. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, so that was my movement phase, just kind of a lot of moving, essentially. And yeah. All right, you guys. So for shooting, my scourges shot at his bloat drone. They did 2 damage, because I thought their guns were flamers. They are not, so they ran. So I had to actually, roll the hit and stuff. So that was not great. Plus I needed 5s. I think 4 went through though, so he needed 3s anyway. So 2 went through, and then I shot with my raider, and I used 2 command points for potent metalotoxins. So the poison guns on my Kabalite warriors inside were able to affect the vehicle. Of course, from all of that shooting, still only 1 wound went through. Then my Hellion shot at his poxwalkers, because their guns are poisoned, and so poison guns are like strength 2, so I would need 6s to wound the bloat drone. I was like, I'm not about to try that. I think they killed 1 poxwalker. 2 poxwalkers. That's nice. Oh no, they only killed 1 because of the homunculus. Okay, yeah. So they killed 1 with their guns. Then the homunculus shot at the same green poxwalkers, killing 1 with his pistol, because he needed 2s and 2s, or technically 3s and 2s. And then the taloses shot at his land raider. 1 went through, and did 4 damage. I probably should have re-rolled it now that I think about it, but anyway. And then from there, my mandrakes shot his poxwalkers, and they actually did, I think they killed 6 or 7, because they did 3 mortal wounds on top of like 4 or 5 actual wounds, because he only has 6s and 6s on them. And then the reaver shot, I think they killed 1 or 2, and then the raider shot, and that took out like 6 or 7 of them. Just because of the mass amounts of poison shots. And that was the shooting phase. Alright, you guys, so for charges, essentially, I just charged the grotesques and the homunculus. So the grotesques got in first roll, no need for rerolls or anything like that. The homunculus, however, rolled a 6, he needed an 8, so I used a command point, and then he rolled a 12, so then he got in. And looking back on it, I don't actually know why I charged him. He's actually not good in combat. It's probably actually just to keep him safer from everything else around him. But anyway, and then I tried to charge my mandrakes, but they failed on like a 3. And I used my reroll for my homunculus, so they weren't able to reroll it, so they're just kind of chilling out. And that was my charge phase. Alright, you guys, so starting off, I swung with my homunculus, and he actually killed like 3 or 4 guys. I used his poison attack, so he needed 2s and 2s, so I think he ended up killing like 2 or 3 of his poxwalkers.
Yeah.
And then he interrupted.
Mm-hmm. So I wagered it because So they have one CP strat called Mutant Strain, which basically 6s to hit cause mortal wounds. And I was like, you know what? I'll just try it. And so I spent 2 CP to interrupt and then 1 CP to activate this. And so I piled in, and each of these Poxwalkers have 2 attacks each. So I was able to get a total of 10 attacks, finagling it around to hit on the homunculus. And I got 2 mortal wounds and a bunch of actual wounds, because when he's in 1-inch range right now, they have -1 toughness against my whole army because of the contagion range currently. And essentially, he failed every single one of his saves, and then he spent command point to try to reroll one, and he failed his feel no pains. And his homunculus just straight up died right out. That was one of the greatest threats of his army. And then I did 20 swings on the grotesques, and they barely did anything. I, in the end, did only 2 wounds. Even with the mortal wounds and stuff, he just kept saving them. But unfortunately, the downside of this is that every 1 to hit turns into a mortal wound against the Poxwalkers. So I killed like 6 of my own in that. But totally worth it, and I get 1 back because I killed 1 model. So it's actually a good thing. Alright, so your attacks?
Yeah, and then my grotesque swung back. I used their flesh gauntlet instead of their monstrous cleaver because I didn't need the AP or the extra damage. Because the flesh gauntlets on 6s to wound do mortal wounds as well. So I was like, well, extra damage in the mortal wound sense is probably the better idea here, because he only has single damage and a field of pain, so no matter what, he gets a save. So I went for that. I only ended up getting 1 mortal wound on him, though. But I think it killed like 8 guys.
Yeah.
So the grotesque swung back, and they didn't eliminate the squad, but they definitely brought it down. Ooh.
Yeah, but I'm offset, so I'm still good.
Yeah. So he dropped the squad. They dropped the squad quite low, and then we'll see how they go in the morale phase.
They're immune to morale, so I already know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that was the fight phase.
Alright, you guys, so for points, I got 2 points in conversion because I have a no man's land objective. Take them alive. I came really close to killing some stuff in melee, but not quite there, so I didn't get any points there. Fear and terror. His units are immune to morale. Nothing has fallen back out of combat, so no points there. And again, I didn't eliminate anything, so no chance for anything. I did get engaged in all fronts, though, because I'm in 3 out of the 4 corners. So not a great secondary turn, but not bad either.
Yeah, and I managed to grind them down because he didn't kill any of my units, but I was able to murk the homunculus. So that was an unforeseen but pleasant surprise. Alright, so for the movement phase, spread some things out with my cultists. I started my big push. I brought my guys that were in the vehicles out. I wasn't going to move them around the vehicles until I finally got to them. I just brought them out just for a simple remembrance. And then I started off by moving my bloat drone on the bottom, the green one, towards the enemy, so he has a 50-50 split on where to charge. Then I organized the Plague Marines around there because he was in the way. They got out, and then they eventually moved forward, and the Chaos Rhino would move and to join them and support beside them. And they're now on the objective, so I now have that because I have OPSEC. Then the Death Shroud Terminators moved out and moved towards the Taloses with the Plague Surgeon in between. I'm not. Those infantry are not affected by the mud things at all, so no minus to move. The Lord of Contagion also moved. He's in a position where he can give his AoE buffs onto everyone around him and also be able to get into good combat. The Deathgaurd Sorcerer moved up to do some stuff, spells and whatever. Apart from that, then up top, Poxwalkers moved on to the objective. My Plague Marine, Reds, then were organized around the Rhino to properly get out. As best I can tell, it's hard to tell what 3 inches is with this thing because of how it measures in the computer. So the Plague Marines moved with 5-inch movement onto the objective, and the Chaos Runner moved into line of sight for support. And then yeah, after that, my Plague squad in the back moved over. It's because he still has units and reserves that can deep strike in, and I want them to be in a position where they can do something for the back line. And that is the end of my movement phase. Alright, so for the psychic phase, my Chaos Sorcerer targeted eventually the Lord of Contagion. I was originally going to do the Deathgaurd Terminators, but I thought in the end it's probably best for the Lord to be rather unscathed. So he hit him with like Miasma Pestilence. Miasma Pestilence, which makes him -1 to hit in general. And so it went off just barely on a 6. And then the Deathgaurd targeted the Talos with a Smite. And he got an 11, so a Super Smite. And he rolled a 4. I decided to keep it. My opponent rolled his 5 of Feel No Pains. Failed all of them. So that was a pretty good psychic phase. Alright, so for the shooting phase, I start off with a Land Raider. So I was going to have it so that all his last cannons would fire into the back of the Raider that's north of him, and all the rest of the shooting would go into the wounded Talos. And then he wiped out the Talos with his melted guns, so the rest of his shooting was wasted. And then the last cannons went into the Raider. He spent a CP stratagem to make it -1 to hit him, and so only 2 last cannons hit, and somehow only 1 wounded because he has an invulnerable save, and I did only 2 damage on the D6, so that was terrible. 4 last cannons at least. But a Talos is dead. Deathshroud Terminators fired at the Talos with their pistol weapons, and because their weapon is a plague weapon, the Lord of Contagion gives them the ability to re-roll all the wounds with his Warlord trait, or Contaminator Aura. And so they did 1 wound to it because he saved them all because he had 3 up save and like 5 up Feel No Pain and stuff. Apart from that, then I moved to the bottom. The Plague Marines mag dumped the Hellions and killed quite a lot. Then the Chaos... Oh, I also actually threw a grenade with the Plague Marines into the Scourges, a Blight Grenade. Killed 1. And the Chaos Rhino fired all of his guns into the Hellions, killed them all except for 1. The Lord of Contagion also fired at the Talos with his grenade weapon. He has a once per game grenade weapon that comes with one of his with his relic weapon. Didn't do anything. He saved them all. Then up top, the Plague Marines fired at the Witches. I forgot, however, to declare like all the different targets for the different weapons and stuff, so my grenades and short range guys were not able to shoot. But they were able to kill like 6 of the Witches. And then my Chaos Rhino fired into the Reavers that were nearby, because closest target, I could get rapid fire off on them, and did 3 wounds total. And then my blue squad of Plague Marines at the very bottom, because 24-inch range, why not? 4 shots, 2 hit, because he had -1 to hit on the Mandrakes, and was able to hit and killed 2 of them. So that was actually a pretty good shooting phase all around, apart from the Land Raider not killing the Raider, but everything else, yeah, it's really going for me. Alright, so for the charge phase, the most important one was getting into that Talos. So the Death Shroud charged, and they made it on a 7. So they got to wrap around a bit, position them in a way that they will still definitely receive buffs from the Lord of Contagion, and such and such. The Lord of Contagion charged the Grotesques, made it in easy. I was thinking of charging the Plague Surgeon, but I decided nah. Then I had the Deathgaurd Sorcerer, because he actually has some power. Charged, he succeeded. And at the bottom, Green Squad of Plague Marines charged the Scourges, and they made it in. And then I had the Photon Bloat Drone charge the Heliarch, and he failed with double 1s. Then I risked it, and then I decided to re-roll it. I spent my 1 CP, and I made it on an 8, and I positioned him closer to the vehicles on my opponent's end. Then, up top, my Photon Bloat Drone made it into the Mandrakes, and then my Plague Marine with bolt guns made it into the Reavers. Simple charge, and so like each of the Plague Marine squads have like 2 melee dedicated guys. So I thought, you know what, why not? And that was the charge phase. Alright, so for the fighting phase, a lot happened. So first up, the Deathshroud Terminator swung on the 1 Talos, but I swung with the champion first, and the champion one-shot it. Well, did 6 wounds to it, which is all it had left. Then my Lord of Contagion... Oh, no. Actually, no. The first thing I actually did was have the Photon Bloat Drone swing because he had always strike first. And then he missed He had 12 attacks. He missed like half of them, and when it came to wound, he needed anything but, and he rolled ones. It was absolutely terrible. But he managed to kill her just barely with 12 attacks. It was ridiculous. Then he piled into his raider. Then the Deathgaurd Terminators killed the Talos. Lord of Contagion swung and finished off 2 of the Grotesques. Deathgaurd Sorcerer swung and killed another one, leaving only 1 left. After that, then my green Plague Marine squad on the bottom, they all swung. With knives, they killed a few. Then I had my guy with a flail swing, killed someone, and then the Cleaver finished off the last guy. And with that, I took the objective entirely, cleared it off. After that, then up top, my Foetid Bloat Drone swung, killed his mandrakes to the man, just barely, just because he barely failed the saves. After that, then the Marines swung on the 2 Reavers that were left alive and did... Actually, it was only the swings from the guys with knives, so 7 guys swung and wiped them out to a man. Then they piled into the Raider, which he swung back with, did absolutely nothing, well, did 2 wounds, which I saved, and then his Raider on the bottom swung on my Foetid Bloat Drone, did absolutely nothing, and then his Grotesque, the last survivor, swung on the Poxwalkers to try to wipe them out to actually do something. It didn't work. They didn't do anything. He did 1 wound, and I saved it on a 6-up Feel No Pain. And that was the fight phase. Alright, so for points, I do have Conversion again. I did at the beginning of the turn controlled 1, controlled 2. Spread the Sickness. On the top left objective, my Poxwalkers completed it, and then lost 3 of them to the D3 wounds. So I'm up to 7 points in there. Grind them down. I killed quite a lot, so it's going to be very difficult for my opponent to stop me from getting it this time. And I got Engaged on all fronts for 2 points. And that is all my points. Honestly, the dice have been really good for me. I've had non-stop ridiculous successes. So, we'll see how it happens.
Alright, you guys. So, essentially what had happened was everything kind of moved. So my 2 raiders that were locked in combat fell back, the green and the red one. The incubi and my warlord popped out of the other raider, and then the raider moved into the fog to give its radius buff nearby. And then what's it called? The Ravagers moved into line of sight. Actually both of the Land Raider, now that I think about it. So that's something. And then the Grotesque stayed in combat. Yeah, that was pretty much it. Just kind of moving around and repositioning because I can, and getting ready to see if we can make this turn useful. Alright, you guys, so with shooting, I basically just started from the top and worked my way around. So I started with the Red Raider, which I used 1 command point for Cruel Deception, basically allowing him to fall back and shoot. And so he shot at the Plague Marines, and I think they killed 1 Plague Marine, I think, all in all. And then they killed 2. They killed 2. Then the Witches shot, and they did nothing. And then both of my Ravagers shot at the Land Raider and did nothing. And then that was actually my shooting phase. So that was everything that happened. Alright, you guys. So for charges, my Witches charged his Plague Marines up top, his red ones. And then my Succubus also charged in as well. Then moving into the middle, my Archon charged his Plague Surgeon, getting in, and then both of my Incubi squads charged his Deathgaurd Terminators. So everyone is in that's going to be in. And that was my charge phase. Alright, you guys, so for combat, I started up with the Witches up top because he could not intervene. And so the Witches, they had like 21 attacks. I think they killed 1 guy. I think they did 2 damage because they needed 3s and 5s. And then the Succubus swung and she did like, I don't know what she did, but she ended up doing 3 damage, so 3 wounds went through, because they're at -1 on the damage. So that was the thing. And then so I think like 2 or 3 plague marines died. And then I moved on to my Archon, who killed his plague surgeon. He had 4 wounds. I did 6 wounds. And so that was nice. And then my Incubi swung, and they killed 3 of his Death Shroud Terminators and left 1 with a single wound remaining. And then that was my part of the combat phase. Then you.
Mm-hmm. So, after those massive deaths, so my Glorta Contagion swung and absolutely obliterated the last Grotesque. And with that, the Chaos Sorcerer consolidated towards the enemies and stuff. Up top, my red squad, 3 of them swung on the witches, 3 swung on the succubus. So the 3 that swung on the witches only killed 1. The champion didn't kill anything. However, the 3 that swung on the succubus were all the melee types. Well, except this one guy with a bolt gun. So one with a cleaver swung his weapons, and 1 went through. She failed 1 and does a d6 damage. Then I rolled a 2. I spent a CP to reroll that, and I got a 3. And then with that, the guy with the bolt gun and his plague knife did a wound. And then the guy with the flail was able to successfully finish her off with 3 wounds to her. So the succubus died. Surprisingly, these regular Plague Marine squads are really flexible, and they do a lot of good work. Then, after that, my Plague Champion swung on the blue Incubi squad. He used the heavy Weeping attacks because they have 3 up armor saves. And so he managed to kill 3 of them, and his special Plague thing that you can give to champions is every time he kills an enemy model, I roll a dice, and on a 4-up, the unit he's from takes a mortal wound. So out of the 3 guys I killed, I created 1 more mortal wound and killed 1 more Incubi. And that was the fight phase. Very harsh.
Alright, you guys, so for points this round, I had 1 objective. I didn't have any of the No Man's Land or other objectives, so conversion didn't work out. I did kill his character, so I got 3 points and take them alive. And then Fear and Terror, I didn't succeed in that one. And then Engage on All Fronts, I got nothing out of that one as well this turn. So pretty garbage turn for points.
Alright, we decided to call the game there. Just my opponent, Deathgaurd, had full control of the battlefield at that point. Opponent did not have enough forces to be able to defeat them. In the center was the strongest forces, but it was still very up in the air whether or not they'd be able to take the center in its entirety. So we decided to call it there. The points were really in the Deathguard's favor anyway. So yeah, so MVP, LVP. So for Deathgaurd, so everyone did incredible. Everyone did their jobs really, really well. And so when it comes to LVP, I'd have to look at, out of all those who did their job, who did the least. It's not about being bad, it's about not being good enough. And so surprisingly, I'm going to have to give the Death Shroud Terminators LVP, just simply because so many of them died. Like almost instantly. Couldn't roll enough 4-ups to save their lives. But despite the fact that they did kill off the Talos. But the thing is, the Death Shroud Champion is the only one who killed the Talos. The other guys were just fodder, but yeah, these guys only killed 1 Talos, and they were immediately wiped out, so really they had the worst performance, despite them being a very powerful linchpin in the army. And, I mean, the Death Shroud Champion then immediately killed 4 of the Incubi, and would have slaughtered more in his next turn. So, unfortunately, due to performance, he's amongst the worst, sadly. Despite them being so important in the game, it's like, yeah, who worked the most? And then MVP, this is an interesting one. This is a big tie. So, first thing, the transports. They took my ridiculously slow units and put them right in the face of my enemy. And these guys have a lot of guns. They could have Meltas, they could have Flamers, they could have all of that. And so I just went with the Combi Bolter because it was just general all-around stuff. I didn't expect much from them, so I didn't want to invest too much in the rhinos, but they did incredibly well. The Chaos Land Raider did incredibly well, transported the Death Shroud and my Lord into the most dangerous places really easily and safely, as well as tanked a lot of shots. To be fair, although Armor of Contempt is what really has saved a lot of the vehicles and my guys, my troops, and that's going away, so this is really the last game I can enjoy that. But transports did really good for Deathgaurd at getting these slow units in the face. Land Raiders, once again, these guys are rocks. They just survive, they take hits, they're walls, very good. And as further than that, Poxwalkers, my goodness, these guys killed the Incubi in their first turn of combat when they were going to be slaughtered. It was incredible, and they survived just barely enough to hold the center, giving me OBSEC and holding off the Grotesques. They did an incredible job. They were outstanding. And the other thing is these Plague Bears, these Plague Marines, these are really good tactical squads because of how well they can be customized and how tough they are. They're incredibly strong, they're incredibly tough. And I just had two general melee guys, one guy that was like an anti-vehicle for the cleave weapon, and one that was a flail against Horde. And they did really well. They were very flexible, and they did very, very well. I'm really surprised at how good these guys perform in battle. And it's really hard to pick a winner, but I'm going to have to go with the Plague Marines because they got me the victory points. They took the north, they took the east. Well, technically, the Poxwalkers held the north, but these guys helped push back the north. So, honestly, these Plague Marines killed tons of witches. They killed his succubus. They killed the rest of the witches. They killed his reavers. They just did tremendous damage. So overall, like, it's a really close game, but victory point wise, Plague Marines MVP. All right, so what do you got?
Well, I think LVPs are probably the easier. I mean, I'd say there's a chunk of units I'm pretty disappointed in, but I think the ones that I just had no luck with this time were not only the witches, but also the scourges. Now, I thought these weapons were actually flamers, so turns out they're not. Usually I do all right with them, but this time I don't know. I probably just played them too aggressively and they're too fragile. But the witches, I think, are 100% the LVP. Just time and time again, like, they have a lot of attacks, but they're only good against something that's toughness 3, which is almost nothing. So that's other Eldar, and that's Guard, and Gene Stealer cults maybe. And so it's just like, I've taken them so many times, they're just not. I just so tired of them. So witches, LVP, 100%. They never end up doing anything for me. And then MVP, I would say it's shocking, but it's really not. The Archon and the Incubi, again and again, prove that they're just massive damage outputs. And so I would say that I don't really know. I guess maybe the Archon, just because he has a little more rounded utility out of the two. But they're both just really good damage for a Dark Eldar. So
yeah,
MVP would be Archon, but really, really close second is the Incubi.
Well, to be fair, the Archon killed one dude, and the the Incubi killed 3 Death Shroud. So take your pick.
Yeah. Well, it's actually funny because I forgot that on 6s to wound they do additional damage, so they actually very likely killed the last guy as well. But I forgot about it, so. But anyway, yeah, so I would say the Archon. He has a little more utility with like rerolls, and he can do some other stuff as well. So I would say it's the Archon. Yeah, so that's what I would say for my MVP, LVP.
All right, then. All right, so final thoughts. So for the Deathgaurd, as far as playing them, honestly, this is a very bad example because so many good things happened to me, I couldn't really see their true potential or like enduring. I mean, the Death Shroud got hit with the absolute most powerful enemy units he had, and they folded pretty easily. But on other places, like, I just absolutely dominated him in certain areas. And the vehicles really did help for a bit. The Chaos Rhinos can really do a lot of damage. So I can't really give a good opinion on these Deathgaurd simply because I had so much good luck. Ridiculously good luck. And so it was just constantly going in my favor and stuff. But there are some very good things. Their Plague Marine tactical squads essentially are very versatile and they do very good. Bloat drones are very fast cavalry, relatively cheap. They do a ridiculous amount of attacks, hit and do good wound. The overall weakening of the enemy through their reducing their toughness is a big deal. Really packs on the wounds. Poxwalkers, honestly, I probably would have brought more and more Poxwalkers. They're super cheap and they're super good and they're super useful. They killed the character and they did so much damage. And so overall, it's like, this is a very strong army. It's like, I could say it's a very good beginner-friendly army simply because of how it helps. If you make mistakes a lot, this can help you. And so a lot of cool things with it. Pretty cool additions to the army. Yeah, it was fun. But this game was a bad example for how effective they are. So what do you think?
That's a good question. What do I think? I definitely haven't quite found my angle on Drukari. I think I played them a little too aggressively. Again, I guess I got used to playing like Space Marines or whatever that have a little more armor, or Custodes or whatever. So I think with the mobility, like, I definitely needed to have stayed back a lot longer in the game, and just did a lot of shooting, even though my shooting isn't great. I have not had good time with Ravagers, so I would probably swap them out for something maybe more Scourges, which is Dark Lances or something. I don't know. But I think there is a good mix. I think it's more Incubi and probably Grotesques, honestly. Those have been the things that I've done the best with. And then like have just like some heavier shooting, and then like a mix of like Hellions and Reavers maybe, just for like board mobility. But yeah, I don't know. I still, like, it's really hard to get a take on them because they are really, really fragile. And so it's kind of hard I think you have to play them a good bit of times before you can really get into a flow with them. Because they can do a lot of damage.
Yes.
But yeah, of course, I also notoriously do not roll very well. So like both of the Ravagers shooting at the Land Raider and then basically missing almost everything is just not ideal.
Talos as well, 4 shots of Melta into him with d6 plus 2 damage.
Oh yeah, and only doing 4 damage with one, the one that went through. Yeah, so I don't usually roll super great either, so that doesn't help. I'm sure a lot of people have great success with Ravagers and Talos and whatever, but I do not. So.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe play it more defensively, essentially. Move constantly from cover to cover.
Right, well, that's what I think. Because I have the mobility, I can afford to play more defensively.
Yeah.
But I'm used to playing more survivable, aggressive armies.
Yeah.
So I think that's the challenge. I just kind of want to run forward and hit stuff because they have a lot of damage potential. So like the Witches, with just 4 of them, had 21 attacks. So a full squad of 10 would have, had like 50 or 60 attacks or something.
Yeah, that would have been it for
And
me.
so it's like, oh, you just want to run up and hit stuff with it, but they're so fragile. You breathe on them wrong and they die. So I think that's the challenge. Especially like their characters, like they can do a lot of damage, but they're also very fragile. So the problem is if you get them into combat, unless you wipe what they're facing, they're probably gonna die.
Yeah.
Even with whatever the 4 Binvolns that the Succubus had, I failed, all of them. So yeah, so I do like Dark Eldar. There's a lot of strengths Drukari. I don't know when they were last Dark Eldar. They have a lot of strengths to them, but I have not found my flow with them. They're not a native army strategy to me. So Yeah, so that is my challenge with them, but I do like them. I think they're actually really fun. I think it's interesting how they blend, the witch cults, the homunculus cults, and the third one, the one with the archons, the
Yeah.
cabals, to create a kind of hybrid blended army. So I think it's interesting.
Well,
But yeah, I didn't play them very well.
Yeah.
So I think that was it.
yeah. Overall in the game, it was pretty straightforward. Yeah, how you're saying, like I played a very slow but heavy armored troop, so I had to move forward. And you basically, all your guys have glass jaws. Essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then so, all right then. So interesting game, interesting comparison. Yeah. It's one thing to play an army, but you have to really get into the mindset of an army to fully get the most out of it. But
Yeah.
as for this will probably be our last Nephilim game. Maybe, depends on how fast things can ship. But
Yeah, I don't know, with that new
Ark of
I
Omens.
can't remember what it's called now.
Ark of Omens. Yeah.
Ark of Omens. Yeah. Sometimes it takes like 3 weeks for that stuff to ship out to me. So
Yeah.
who knows?
Ideally, this would be our last Nephilim game, but reality is unfortunately disappointing almost every time. So we'll see what we play in the future. Don't know. We'll figure that out later. But yeah, GG's GG. So like the video if you like the video, comment if you want to comment. If we got anything wrong, which we always do.
Always do.
Yeah, and more to come. Bye.